Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Okay, I'm here with Alexander Muller, aka TheSlaSH. So I want to start the interview on the topic of SK, and we'll get to some of the other things later. So the first place I want to start is, historically, I've known SK from the Quake era, when it was just a clan, then it became a team, then it became a multi-game team, branched out like that. There were other names at the time in the German scene who were the same. In fact, as teams, they were rivals. Okrana, you had MTW. These teams, some of them people will know because they became big organizations later. Some of them didn't, some of them fell away. Why, of all those early teams, do you think SK is the one that still exists now and still has profile?
I think the main reason is because we had the right people at the right time. There's a couple of things you have to consider when you try to extend your clan into a business. The business side is a huge part of it, and I think we had the right people, the right network on board. Others were really fighting for sponsors. We were as well, but I think we were smarter than others in that perspective. We were more long-term orientated, and I also think the mix of Andreas, myself, and Ralph in the beginning was like perfect, because we knew the scene, we knew the community, we knew what was the next big thing in terms of website, World of Warcraft. That was a huge blast. We also understood how to create a team. Look at the Counter-Strike teams we did, but also how to pick up new talent. I don't know, I think it's the mixture of everything. And there's a couple of other names out there that, when you think about the past, I mean, you know it better than I do probably, is think about the clashes we had with 3D, CPL. I mean, that was a blast of a team. The Korean team, was it We Made
Fox.
We Made Fox, yeah. When we clashed them at World Cyber Games 2008 here in Cologne.
Oh yeah, sure.
I mean, there were a lot of names out there, and yeah, we were always amongst those names. And now there's different teams, different competition. But I think one of the other main reasons is also time. Back in the days, you couldn't live off a team. You couldn't manage it and do it as a full-time job. Nowadays, probably a couple of people can. That attracts good management, I think. So the teams that come up right now and are our fiercest competition, like the Fanatics, the EGs, all of these brands, now they have a level playing field compared to us.
Whenever you talk to people who run at a company, not just a team, they're always going to try and identify what is the actual identity of the team, what is our philosophy, or what are the core things that when everything else goes away, that's what we have to stick by. And obviously, if you start a team all that way ago and it was just a Quake team, that's going to change over time. So if you think of the period when SK was getting big, what do you think the philosophy was there? What was the motivating thing that kept you on track, or that was what we were heading for? What do you think, would you define it as then?
I think it's quite simple. We were never satisfied with a second. Whenever we came second, it was a disappointment. We lost. End of story. We always wanted to be perfect. We always wanted to win the tournament. We always went for the trophies. As hard as it is, sometimes when you lose, and when you lose early in a tournament, I mean, it happens. That's nature. But our philosophy, our DNA has always been, if we enter a tournament, we want to win. Sure. And we try to do everything to win. That's basically it. I think other teams, they look for other stuff. They try to differentiate, they try to be the friendly guys or anything else. No, we're competition, we're here for competition, we want to win. That's it, it's that simple. And I think that's also something that partners, sponsors love about SK Gaming.
When you mentioned before, actually, BDS, Andreas, when he was in the team, I always remember the side that he was had a special talent for was community building big websites. He's done it a few different times. And so that era, everyone remembers that. At the time, people watching this now who are newer fans will have to realize Facebook didn't really exist back then. So for gamers, this was sort of the equivalent. Everyone had a profile. That's where you could check out what was going on. That era, now with I mentioned stuff like Facebook, there's other things that are in this sector now and that have taken that sort of era away. And so we don't really think of the SK site to the same degree as that. It's not like the one hub that was the community site. And we have things like Reddit and other things. How has the transition been away from that period? How do you think of SK, the community side of things now? How do you visualize it?
It's still a hub, but basically what you just said is 100% true. It has lost a lot of the importance for us. Nowadays you communicate faster, you communicate shorter. You got 140 letters you can use on a tweet, and that tweet can turn the esports community upside down. I mean, if I go Ocelot sucks, Ocelot is out the team. Just imagine, if I did that last year within the summer split, that would have been total chaos in the whole esports community. So back in the days, we had these long articles, we had features. When we were preparing for a tournament, we were looking like in depth at like the top 8 teams probably from different regions, explaining where they come from, where they are right now. I mean, we were giving a lot of content to the community. Nowadays, it's like boom, 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 boom. You shoot out content just like that. You have it on Facebook, you have it on Twitter, you have it on Reddit. You shoot these little videos, and everybody's consuming esports way faster and more dynamic than we did back in the days. So a website, there's no way you can keep up with that speed because the website itself is just not built for that. It's nice to have it, and it kind of displays who you are. It shows your identity, it shows your logo, it shows your sponsors, and it's something you need to have. That's my personal view, but it has lost a lot of the importance.
When we think historically of the team, there will always, usually it's whoever's doing the best is like the side that will carry the brand to some degree. So famously, it would be Counter-Strike at a certain point in time when it was the best team for sure. And then later on, we have like Quake, we have Starcraft 2. There's different periods where it makes sense, which is the game that's leading the brand. Counter-Strike's now back in SK, or was at some point recently. Yeah. How does Counter-Strike still factor? Is there a degree to which, just because of the legacy, you would want to somehow get it in there, like having Quake still? Is there a degree to which it's possible Counter-Strike might just never be a part of the future? How do you see it in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, the absolute focus you have right now is League of Legends, end of story. Everything that comes after League of Legends is tier 2, tier 3, way behind in the back. If there's a good opportunity, like with Counter-Strike, it was presented to us last year. We took the opportunity. We did good. We could have done better, but we did good with it. Do we see Counter-Strike evolve just like other games do? We don't. We see, even like League of Legends is here, and like every day it gets a little better, a little bit more professional, and you know, the broadcast, more eyeballs on it. The growth is just insane. And the other games just don't have it right now. If one of these games picks it up and you see, okay, there's potential for this one to grow for 2-3 years, then you can start investing. I mean, I think the major point is look at how long it took us to say goodbye to Counter-Strike and to say, okay, SK Gaming is trying to find a new identity in League of Legends. It took us a long time to do so. Starcraft 2 was in between. And people considered us not being on top of the game at all. We didn't have a player until we signed first like these semi-contracts with MC, and then MC with us like 100%, but that's it, right? I mean, people thought of SK, okay, you guys lost it. But actually it was a tough time for everybody because you can't invest in everything unless you have, I don't know, 4 or 5 non-plus-ultra sponsorships in your back pocket. Yeah, then this works. Still, I think you would burn a lot of money if you do it. So for us right now, and I've said it over and over again, League of Legends is the absolute focus. We know why. We know why we want to invest into this game. We believe in this game. And as long as the other publishers, developers don't see their games moving in the same direction and don't push for it, I think it's going to stay like that.
So when you kind of describe the criteria of how you're thinking about the games and what they need to be like a significant part of SK, then one of the obvious like holes is, does that mean SK Dota 2 isn't a big enough priority yet? If SK doesn't want like one of the best Dota 2 teams, is there something, are you still skeptical in some sense about like what the game's future is, where it fits? What are you thinking about that game?
Always in relation to League of Legends, yes. Always in relation. The thing is, we have a lot of Dota teams coming to us and they want our support. We have to consider our resources. How much can I spend? And if a certain level is reached, then I can spend no more. It's very simple. I mean, if I have, let's say, 10,000 a month, I can spend. And if I already spent 9,000 and a team comes up and wants 3,000, then we're 2,000, above the limit. Nothing I can do about it. So either a team goes down and says, I'm going to go for the 1,000 a month, or there is no sponsorship. It's that simple. But the other factor as well, we don't know how Dota 2 is going to play out. Just look at the structure of LCS compared to the international. The LCS gives you a lot of stability. Also, the Coke League right now gives you even more eyeballs. I mean, that structure in your back pocket gives you a lot of security you can give to your sponsors. It doesn't matter if you're LCS or Amateur League. Both are very attractive because they are very structured. And I know exactly what's going to happen next year. Because the structure is just going to be, they're going to add up a little more here and there, but the main frame will stay the same. For Dota 2, I don't know. So why would I make one of my sponsors invest into something that we don't know about? League of Legends is so exciting right now to watch, to play, everything. It's the perfect thing for us. So that's why we stick with it.
So to touch on that idea, but also to bring in, when we mentioned about Counter-Strike, and you were saying how it actually took SK a long time to move away from Counter-Strike because of the idea is like it's a game that was so identifiable with SK, and if you could stay in it, you'd try. So on this note, it would be easy for someone to say, oh, in that case, I understand why they stick with Quake, because Rafa is like one of the best ever. He's still going to win, and it's like, again, we want to stay in a bit. Does that mean if Rafa wasn't the Quake player, Quake would probably just be gone from SK now?
Well, Rafa himself as a personality, as a character, is a deciding factor, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to discredit any other player out there, but the professionalism that Shane puts to the table it's perfect. I mean, why wouldn't you go with him? You know, also the story. I mean, think about it. He was the one guy that 04 told us, you should actually go for him. He's going to be the next #1. We took him in. We thought he would flourish in like 18 months. It took him 7 months. Then he became the #1, and he never really became like #3 or so. He was fighting for the #1 spot all the time. I'm not going to say that, you know, Alexei wasn't #1 for some time, or other players were challenging him or winning tournaments, but Rafa was always 1, 2, 3, and more 1 than anything else. So yeah, he is kind of a player that we identify with. We picked him up when he was no one. He became #1 with us. We stick with him, of course we do. As long as Rafa says he still feels it, and he would be the first one to say, I don't have it in me no more. He wouldn't go to a tournament when he thinks that he will finish 5 to 8. He wouldn't do that. So as long as Rafa says, I'm going to keep on playing and I'm going to aim for the #1 spot, I know that chances are more than 50% that he will actually do so. As long as that happens, he's our guy. He's our Quake player. And you also, you know, one addition. Rafa stuck with us even though other teams were trying to, you know, give him more money than we wanted to. We stuck with our plan. We said, no, this is the amount of money we will be spending on you. And Rafa was like, yeah, that's my team. That's my brand. I'm going to go with these guys. Probably now is a time where it pays off because we still support him. We still have him on board, even though Quake doesn't play a big role at all.
Because a good equivalent, I thought, was how things have been now with MC in the Starcraft years. Because you were describing your philosophy before, like we only have a set amount to spend and we have to decide like who's worth it, and it's not just a player, it's also you need like the personality or an image to sell. So with a Starcraft 2, there's a degree to which, with some of the things in the organization, like having Rice, etc., this was like a perfect opportunity to get a player like MC. It's very rare you can get these big Koreans in the Western teams. So is it that because you had MC, you had all the bases covered? Because I look at the other teams in Europe, we think at Mouse Sports, Fnatic, these teams, a lot of them, it seems like they were spending a similar amount, but they were like trying to take like a splatter shot approach. Like we'll have 5 players and then one of them will get to the top 8 and the other, you know, if the others don't, it doesn't matter. We'll see who does each time. Like, did you never think of like, I want a whole team of StarCraft 2, I want 4 good players, I want my European player, my North American, you never wanted it like that in StarCraft 2?
No, actually we didn't. Actually, MC was kind of, okay, you see him, you see the way he interacts with his audience, the way he goes out there and says, I'm #1. I'm not a #2 guy. I'm a #1 guy. Well, that's us. That's our language. So yeah, he's the perfect fit. Why would I go for, you know, 2, 3 other players, even if I could afford them? Why would I invest into those guys if they are not putting out the same statement? And MC did it in a way that was so dominant, like in front of the camera. There was no way for us to go any other direction. And I think also he might be the kind of player who would have disliked it. I think he wanted our attention 100%. He wanted to be the one player at SK. Not the, okay, he's the #1, but we have #2, 3, and 4 here as well, in case he doesn't make it. But also, you're right, it's not our philosophy. I said it before, I'll say it again. I get a lot of flames for it. I don't believe in having 10 players on my roster for StarCraft 2. It's a 1v1 game. It doesn't make sense to me. You know, why would I send 10 players into a tournament when you have like 32 in total? It's like 10 come from my roster. That's super boring. I mean, then a team kind of becomes a sponsor of several players. I don't see a player being a player of that team, to be honest. I see it the other way around then. And I don't believe in that, you know. I don't want a final where SKMC plays against SK Yedong. Where's the excitement? I mean, SK is going to win. SK sponsors are going to win. Fans will identify with single players. Therefore, a single player makes sense for you. Now, of course, I hear the argument. The community will say, well, but then we would only have this and this amount of players in total in these tournaments. I agree. It's right. But I never said that my argument only has upsides. It has a downside as well. If there was a team league like we had in the times of the WC3L, yeah, then you have a team. Then you go for 4, 6 players. You have substitutes. You know, you have different compositions you want to go with, and we had that. Like Remind, Lun, Miyu, you know, all these players on the same team. We had European players, we had Korean players, but it was a different time. Right now, everything is so one-on-one orientated in StarCraft 2 that our philosophy is one player. That's it.
It sounds like you're trying to bridge, like, you want the results have to be there as well. That's like the basis. But then also they have to have some image quality where I can sell that guy as well, okay?
Yeah.
So what this would lead into is people in StarCraft 2 community are very cynical about evil geniuses, okay? They think that evil geniuses just think to themselves like, oh, we just want the guys who have the big image. And that's the idea. Our business is we sell the big image to the sponsors, and that's how we get the money. And they have to be decent in the sense that they're still in a tournament, otherwise they're not going to have exposure. But when people see how many players are on their roster, the amount of money they spent, it's a lot of money, a lot of investment in StarCraft 2 particularly, and yet the overall results for that amount are quite bad relative to how much they're spending compared to everyone else. So do you think that they honestly believe the same thing, like they're going for results equally as much? What do you think is the difference between the philosophy there? Have you ever been tempted to pick up a player where he would have the exposure for sure, but maybe the results aren't as good now? What do you think?
It's tough to judge other teams, but it's no secret that I don't think the strategy EG is using on StarCraft 2 is the right strategy, because if you're a fan of it, I think it also weakens other teams as well. Because as a fan, I'm a pure fan of sports just like you are. I'm a fan in esports as well. You know, I want to have this one guy for one game that I can identify with. If he's in the tournament, if he wins, I'm super happy. And if he loses, it's big drama. I don't want to see him lose. But there's no in-between these feelings. And if you create an in-between, and I think EG is creating an in-between with all these options you have, so you're a fan of EG, well, you got 20 players you can choose from. Who's yours? You know, and they're so different characters. So I don't see that you can establish a message for EG. What does EG stand for? Is it the perfect Korean play style that dominates tournaments? It's not, because then they would win more tournaments. Is it the Northern American brand that, you know, is the one competition to Korean players? It's not. It was with Huck, but that's it. It's over. It's a couple of years ago. And so I don't know what their identity is. They even have a German player, I don't know, a European player. I really don't know. Is Naniva on the team? Is he off the team? Did they put him into Alliance? I don't want to know. I want to have a story. I want to have a long-term story. Then as a fan, I can relate to it. And if it's not there, I think it weakens the overall argument. So yeah, I'm not saying I agree with you because you didn't say it that way, but I would say EG is not, you know, putting the best efforts into building their own brand with what they do. Probably having the League of Legends team in the Northern American region right now, if that's where EG is and stays, that's a statement. Community will need some time to adapt to it because it was a European team. If that happens, good. Like in Quake, they have the hang, one US player, good, I love it. In StarCraft 2, I don't think it's good. But that's my opinion.
Because since you're like a guy on the inside of the industry for a long time, I want to get your take on something about EG in general, because when I try to piece things together, I can only go on a little bit of information. I have to try and bridge that gap myself, you know. And so when I see how successful EG is in business, amazing numbers, the amount of salary they can pay people is incredible. Like I can't even believe some of the numbers. And so the thing that's always been surprising though is when I've tried to figure out like how did they get from, because when me and you remember them, they used to be just a small Counter-Strike team in North America. They weren't the biggest organization. This was a time when like the SKs, the Fanatics, these were number one. Yeah. But now we see famously, because they're in North America specifically, they've risen up as a brand, and some people would say in terms of the money they can get into the brand, they might be the best in the world at that one thing, okay? So when I try to figure out how can they do that and others can't, some people will just say cynically like, oh, well, what happens is they're in the North American sector, all their sponsors are North American, and I know for a number of years, like with their Counter-Strike team, they used to say to them like, just make sure you win like the IEM in North America, you win the World Cyber, so we can keep saying to the sponsor, like we're number one in North America, okay? It's almost as though they have access to a pool of talent there and sponsors, that if you're in Europe, maybe you're fighting with Intel Europe or someone like that. It's a different, you're not going for the same sponsor group. Is this just people in Europe who are like bitter that they can't get all those people and they're like, oh, well, we don't have access to that? Has EG actually like outperformed people in a business sense? Are they in a unique position like that? Like they have access to people like you don't if you try to talk to sponsors or something? How would you weigh it up there? What would you say to that?
It's three arguments, and it's just rational. Number one argument is the Northern American marketing region is one united region, which makes it way easier. So if you talk to Intel Northern America, you have one budget, one manager you need to convince, that's it. If I talk to Intel in Germany, I don't have the Scandinavian budget, I don't have the French budget, I don't have the UK budget, I don't have the Polish budget. We are so split up in Europe that my job in terms of marketing is harder. That's just irrational. I'm not crying about it, we are staying here, we have our core here, it's all good, it's all fine. But still, the opportunity EG has at hand is bigger. Number two, decision making. They made very good decisions in the beginning of Starcraft 2. They made aggressive moves and they made a name for themselves. So you got to give it to them. Very smart. You built the brand in the right way at that point of time. Good. That led to probably some of the best contracts you could ever fetch in esports. And yes, you're right, they fetched those contracts and they are living off of those. Can they deliver long term? We don't know, we'll see. Is their strategy so superior to what any other team does? I don't think so. I think on the battlefield they still have to prove themselves, and money won't be the deciding factor at some level.
So the next place I want to go is in League of Legends mainly. Mm-hmm. And so the first place I want to start here is like I'm privy to some knowledge that some people aren't, because I used to work at SK and I've talked to you about these things when these games were gradually coming up. So I've seen the genesis of them coming into the team. And you were one of the first people who was, everyone else when they saw League of Legends and they saw like it's starting to get slightly big, they were like, go all in. Everyone has to get in here as fast as possible. We have to get the best players. Oh, is he paying like 700? I pay 900. Like it was that sort of a gold rush scenario, you know. But since I know you've seen other games where there's been bubbles and there've been these things where just because you invest all this money now doesn't mean next year it's going to be worth it. You seemed a bit skeptical early on, like you thought the salaries were outrageous or they were just out of whack for what you could get from the players. Like, has that stabilized to some degree? Are you still of that mind at all about League of Legends? Like, are the top salaries in the West still too high? What do you think on this topic?
I still believe that we made very good decisions in the past when it came down to limiting the enthusiasm about player marketing compensations, salaries, however you want to call them. For us, it's marketing compensations. We don't believe in overpayment. We believe in a player has to achieve something. If you want to be the number one guy in terms of the money you get each month, there's a lot of work behind it. I have to work a lot for this money. There's a couple of other people that have to work a lot for the money that we earn and can pay to players. And therefore, our philosophy is quite simple. If you want to have, if you as a player want to have a stake of that, then you have to contribute. Then you have to be really good. There's a couple of players out there that was never a question that they would get like everything they would ask for within reason. MC is one of them. Shane is one of them. The Counter-Strike girls were those. The FIFA guys were those characters. I'm quite sure I'm forgetting a couple of guys right now, but League of Legends in the beginning, it was so hyped and people were so ahead of themselves that it was hard to understand, okay, where does the rationale come from that you think you should get this amount of money. Yes, we overspent. We overspent in a couple of regions, we overspent in a couple of teams. SK is probably still one of the mid to lower end paying teams in the LCS overall, but we know that we can pay the money we promise a player. We're not going to go out of business, we're not going to screw up a license process, we're good at what we do, we don't overpromise at that end, and that's basically it. And you know, I want to grow in a stable way. If I overspend right now, and in a year from now, I hit a dry period, and I don't sign these 2-3 big sponsorships or re-sign them, then I have a huge problem, because you know, there's expectation from players towards me, the company, SK Gaming, that I can't hold up to. What then? Do I just close my doors and, you know, reopen 2 months later and just say, yeah, company filed bankruptcy, oh, here's a new company called SK Gaming right now? That's not me. I'm not gonna do this. And therefore, yeah, we are still conservative at that end. I still believe it's the right course of action. I still believe, and I see it day in, day out with the players, that they need a lot of education. They need to understand that if you want to, on a monthly base, earn as much as, it's higher than the average income you have in Germany. For what? For being a professional gamer that works from season starts in January and ends in August, maybe September. I mean, let's be honest here. There's guys that have to pay off rent, have a wife, 2 kids. They live off less than the gamers do. You know, you got to put it all somehow into relation. I understand the market is growing and these guys become stars, but to become a star doesn't mean he has 400,000, 500,000 Facebook likes. Becoming a star means that he can sell 400,000 mouse pads a year. That's a star, because that puts actually money into the system. That justifies him getting a lot of money. Fatality is a superstar, not because of the 10 or 11 world titles he won. I mean, you know, we can argue about, oh, does his title in this and that game, does it count here, does it count not? That's not the question. He put his brand on a lot of product. The product is selling with his brand. That makes him a superstar. Pure streaming numbers, pure Facebook, pure Twitter, trending on Reddit, that's nothing that will contribute to the economics of esport for now. It will at some point, but hard facts don't lie. So at the end of the day, I think it was overhyped in the beginning, and unless we start really making money as an ecosystem out of that, that includes fan merchandise, that includes gaming directed product, that includes services like, you know, streaming, subscription, stuff like that. Unless that is actually adding up, I don't see the reason behind why should sponsorships all of a sudden explode. If a SteelSeries or a Razer or a Rocket, if they sell, let's say, 50 million of product each year, and now there's League of Legends, and League of Legends is huge, still, SteelSeries, Razer, Rocket, they make 50 million a year. Where's the rationale for me to go there and say, hey, now I need 2 million instead of 1 million for a year? I mean, they'll look at me and say, how can you help me sell more product? Because it comes down to that. And only if I can answer that question, they will either invest or give me more of the growth that they will have. But that's the only equation that matters at the end of the day.
Because when you described earlier on the idea of like you have this set budget, this is like a key quality, I think, for League of Legends that makes it a bit unique. We saw a tiny bit in Starcraft 2, but not as much, where it was possible for a team to emerge from nowhere, become an organization in League of Legends only. They have no other players, but because it's such a huge game, they become one of the biggest in the world. So you could have like TSM, CLG. These were just teams only in League of Legends. So in theory, they've it looks like they've taken a shortcut to the top, whereas all these other multi-game teams, it took them a long time. You build it brick by brick with each game. But then people will say, along with your philosophy before, you have this set budget and you decide, right, I'll give this much to that game, this one maybe I won't invest in, this one I'll put this much in. They've basically gone all in. If League of Legends had failed 2 years ago, they'd have risen, then they'd have fallen. We'd never hear of them again. Is there a degree to which it's difficult for SK to compete with someone like that, who essentially is gambling in a way? They're saying, I'm going to put everything into this one game and it has to succeed. But obviously, if the game succeeds then the gamble pays off. Is it going to be difficult for SK to have the best team in the same way as like TSM could have the best team, or someone could have the best team in Europe because they pay the most salary or something? Like, how do you balance trying to be the best, but with like spending money? I mean, it's easy to be, if you have unlimited money, you can be Real Madrid and say, oh, I just want the best players. Money isn't an option, I have to have the best players. It sounds like there's another rationale to you, like it has to be like the best player for how much I have to spend and what I get. So how do you balance up these two things, the big teams in League of Legends that come from nowhere, and then where does SK fit in relative to them in League of Legends?
Well, first of all, we end up at the same playing field. We are leveled. When we start the season, it's 8 teams, we play each other 4 times. That's it. At the end of the day, you have a tableau, you have playoffs, and you'll decide who's going to be number 1, who's going to be number 2, 3, and so on. So that's level. There's always teams, and you know just as I do, there's always teams that come out of nowhere. Lemondogs last year, Europe, come on, let's be honest. Who would have thought that they could dominate the regular league? That was just amazing. Come playoff time, you see the old experienced team rising up to expectation. You know, Fnatic does it again. They had a perfect year last year, and they're still doing pretty good this year. So you can see that over time, a team evolves. And whether or not an organization goes the same way depends on the management behind it. The TSMs, the Cloud9s, the CLGs, they will all have their bump in the road. Once they hit that, you will see how good the management is really. Let's say you have guys like Doublelift or Reginald, when they say, okay, we step up now, we become managers of the team, so we have to live off a salary. Okay, let's give him 5 years. So, girlfriend, becomes more serious, marriage, kids. I need more money than the money I got out of the company as a bachelor. You know, the challenge they will find is to grow a company so the company itself gets older as well, and you know, has a fit for grown-up people, not only as, you know, the young guns. It was easier for me to run an esports team 10 years ago than it is right now. I have other responsibilities in my life, and I need to have my job take care of these responsibilities as well. So I think long term the challenges will be the same for each and every team out there. Our advantage is we went through these challenges already. We are a grown company, we are a grown business. There was a funny moment at the managers conference in LA last year when we were discussing, all the team managers from LCS, I was a part of that as well, and I put out the argument and said, you know, in December we're gonna play promotion, and it's not gonna hurt us that bad if we lose promotion, because the sponsors, they will stick with us because they believe in our long-term story, and you know, they believe in us trying again very hard for the summer split to come back, or for 2015 to come back. They know that we're not gonna fail like in total. So, and the other teams were like, how the hell do you do that? Because they have these 3-month, 6-month sponsorships, and they go from season to season. They have all these insecurity in their business right now. It can blow in their faces just like that. And if they're not good in other games as well, if they can't balance anything for their sponsors, it's gonna get even harder for them. You know, there's a couple of sponsors that believe in management long term, and we had this from the very start. And there's teams that they are hyped, their brand is hyped, but once the hype is over, the sponsorships will decrease, they might be over, and then you'll see how good the management really is. How much work can they put into this brand? And can this be a long-term success? I mean, none of us can plan for the next 10 years. We as SK, we can plan for 2-3 years. And I think we are ahead of the curve when it comes down to that. There's probably 4 or 5 teams out there on this planet that can do that. SK is one of them. And that differentiates us from these other shotgun teams, however you want to call them right now. But that's not meant in a disrespectful way. Sure. It's just, this is the phase they are in, this is the phase we are in, and we have an advantage here, they have an advantage there.
So to put some of these like answers together then, explain to me this concept then. to someone, when we were talking about, you were saying like the player's idea of what a salary should be, and it's going to be different because I know from my personal experience, all the player looks at is the market value. He looks at like, okay, if this person will offer me 100 more, then will you match that or will you pay me 100? Like that's all he's thinking of. So if someone else offers him this much, that's how much he's worth now, regardless of what the actual team would get out of it. To him, that's all he knows, you know. And so as a result, we get these scenarios where a lot of the teams who've gone all in, they can get those players because they're willing to pay the absolute max salary if they want that player, okay. How do you get into a position where, does that mean if, let's imagine for next year, you had the opportunity to sign someone equivalent to when, you know, Moscow 5's company went bankrupt or whatever. So anyone who signed their team, in theory, were signing the best European team. They know outright, I've got the best European team, and it's going to cost a certain amount. They're going to want a certain amount of salary. For someone like SK, it wouldn't have been worth saying like, we'll be the highest bidder to get maybe the best team now and go forward to next year. That's, at the moment, that's not the right philosophy?
No, not for us.
Okay, why?
Because we don't think that League of Legends is stable enough right now in terms of the team compositions that this is something you can go for 2, 3, 4 years. You know, we just went through a phase where we had to re-evaluate everything on our roster. Compared to last year, we got 1 player left. 4 are gone. 1 is playing amateur, the biggest star of League of Legends in Europe. He's amateur and he doesn't even make it into the top 8 in amateur. Yeah. So he is struggling on his end. Is it because of his popularity? I think he will get a lot of good sponsorships and, you know, he can establish a team, but will he be able to climb his way back into a top 8 position with the sponsorship, with the fame he has? That's a tough road. And I know that me saying it right now will, you know, make it even easier for him to succeed on this road because he's the kind of guy, he wants to be criticized, then he gets better. But that's where he is. Kevin is with Millennium. They're on the bottom of the tableau right now. Neve went to Alliance. They are behind us right now. And John, he's not playing. So our whole industry is about putting out campaigns, putting out advertisement for partners. That's the professional circle you're in. So if I did all the photo shoots last, let's say, September to roll out the 2013, 2014 campaigns with my partners, you know, we could all wrap them away, throw them away, and all this money would be just wasted. For what? So you want the stability. Here I have a core market. My core market is Germany, Scandinavia. We're huge in France, Turkey, and we have a huge presence in the Eastern European countries. Russia is big for us as well, but it's not our main market. So for me to sign a Russian team, that will be a shift of my market. Yes, Gambit has a lot of fans, or back then Moscow 5 had a lot of fans in my core market as well. But a player like Ocelot last year had more fans in this market. He was more valuable for me overall than a Gambit would have been. That doesn't mean that I don't like the guys, that I, you know, wouldn't find ways to work with them. But the window of opportunity wasn't there. And the pure argument of, so they give them 10,000, we go in 15,000. We don't do these muzzle games. We don't go out there and say, yeah, okay, we're the big guys. Here's the contract, sign here. Why? We want a team, a player to be 100% with us as well. We want them not to say, yeah, they gave us more money, that's why we wear the tag. We want them to say, actually, I always wanted to be a player on SK. I always wanted to fight for this team. I wanted to have this hoodie on, this cap on. That's part of me. Then he's the right player for us. If it's just about the money, and you know the muzzle game would be just about the money, then it wouldn't be us.
I'll give you a sports analogy to set this question up, okay? So in football, famously, when the player Roy Keane used to play for Manchester United, him and Alex Ferguson, the manager, supposedly had such a good connection, they thought along the same lines, like they'd helped each other in their careers, that in interviews, Alex Ferguson would kind of imply that, okay, when Roy Keane retires, you know, I'm going to retire eventually, he'll be like my successor, like he's going to be the man I think should be the job. And obviously that didn't happen, okay? Roy Keane left, he went somewhere else, he did his own thing, and it ended there, okay? There was an interview recently where Ocelot said a comment that was just a throwaway part of the answer that no one picked up on, where he said something along the lines of like, I could have stayed at SK, I could be managing director of SK one day. Was this just an idle comment? Was it really something you saw in his future? Like if he sticks with us, he could be here one day, similar philosophy. What do you think of this comment?
Actually, he said eventually, not at some point,
Okay.
he said eventually. It was very strong, yeah, I recognized it just as you did. Behind the scenes, Carlos and I had a lot of discussions, a lot of fruitful discussions last year. He had a crisis, we all know that, there's no talking around it. We spent a lot of time, or I tried to spend a lot of time talking to him about it. And my personal view is that Carlos has a lot of potential inside of him to become a manager. He's not there, but I always opened him the door at SK and told him, you know, if you feel like your career is over, esports wise, and you don't want to be in front of the camera, you know, and analyzing matches, if you want to make decisions, if you want to go to the other side and, you know, make the business decisions, then this is probably the right place for you. And I don't know, but my feeling is that you can succeed here very far. Yeah, you could possibly run SK. I see it in him, I saw it in him, but he makes his own decisions and he's making a decision for his brand now. And that's it, you know, I'm not saying there was a window of opportunity for him to become that, to be there. The time is not there yet. You know, that window of opportunity would open in the future, in you know, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, who knows. And there's other candidates that I'm working with as well that I believe in very strongly. But Carlos is one of the guys, he has a lot of charisma, he has a lot of character, and he has this will to win. So yeah, he came close to that. It's not based on his imagination or anything. There's a fundament for him putting out this comment, but will it ever come true? No, it won't. I think he said it himself in that interview. He's going his own way now. He's you know, trying to spread his wings, trying to establish his own brand, and he wants to have his own brand. That's one of the things we learned in the past month. He's not the kind of guy who wants to contribute to a brand that is established. He wants and he needs to be his own brand. I don't think that's going to help him along the path, but it's one of his, I don't know, ways of life.
When you've described like the criteria of what you think of in a player and what makes him valuable to you, beyond results, there's obviously this component of they have to be like a certain image they have to project. It has to be worth something in terms of what I can show to a sponsor, like I can give you this. And Ocelot fits that criteria definitely. But people criticizing last year's play just in the game would have said, okay, they think Ocelot dropped off, or they don't think he was as good, or he isn't as good appropriate to his fame. And so that's like maybe the better way to put it. And so they will think to themselves, well, the reason SK would never remove him is because he's so famous, he's still going to match up all the other criteria there. You can still put other players around him. You can still do something with him. There's an opportunity there. Is this true to any degree? Would Ocelot have always been in SK as long as the other things were there outside of the game? What would you say to that answer?
No, I mean, being SK means that you need to be on top of the game at some point. And yeah, he has lost a lot of his explosiveness, a lot of his talent on mid, where others have outranked him. It's that simple. Was he still one of the top 8 mid laners at the end of last season? No, he wasn't. And that's the main problem. And he did not contribute to the rebuilding of a new team. And then at some point, you know, you take decisions and you say, yeah, but then you're not the guy. If you don't want to contribute here, if you're playing political games, that's all fine. It's not like, you know, we were open to each other. And when he told us, well, when we had the discussion where he told us that he did not want to go into 2014 with SK, we were like, okay, that's fine. We took a decision internally as well, and it's good that we match, but it's good that you now have a way for yourself. That's it. So he, as much as he is a public figure, that's not what League of Legends is about. Sif HD is a great guy, but he's not a competitor. Carlos tries to be a competitor very hard, and he is a competitor, but he's not good enough to play top 8 mid lane right now in Europe. And that's the problem he has. And he's the only guy who can change it. But he needs to have a solid plan. He needs to have players around himself. He needs to have the motivation. He needs all of that. And right now, we'll see where he ends up.
Because one of the unique things about Ocelot is when I think of the streaming success, almost every other big streamer who's a big personality is nearly all in North American in League of Legends. And there almost seems to be a disparity there. So for example, Bjergsen was just another mid player in Europe. He was well known, had a lot of potential, but if he goes and joins TSM and he can stream in America, now he's got the biggest streaming numbers in the whole world for that game. Is there some reason, do you think, aside from just hours of the day, that holds Europe back from being as big in streaming as it is in there? Like, why was Ocelot one guy who could stand out in that sense? Like, why do you see any way that Europe can advance on North America in terms of streaming stuff?
I can see that Carlos has a lot of charisma and has an aura around himself that you want to follow him, you want to like the guy. He just has it. You know, I like him a lot. Like, as a person, I like to hang around with him. It was always fun, like always, no matter what we did. Like the first CS in Vegas, the time here in Cologne, even though it was a rough time, but still, whenever we spent time, even critical moments, it was good. And he contributes a lot to making you feel good. And I think he does the same on the stream. People like his way of entertainment. They like the positiveness he brings to the table and all of that. So it's that simple. I don't agree with the Bjergsen comment you just put out there.
In what sense?
I think that Bjergsen was probably the most wanted mid laner, aside from Froggen and Xpeke.
No, I mean in the sense of streaming though.
Yeah, in the sense...
If he was to stream
Sure.
in Europe,
Okay.
the numbers can't be the goat. So what do you think is the difference there?
I think what Bjergsen did very good, and when you see the interviews with him right now, he has grown a lot. He's been working a lot on himself, I guess. He's going in the same direction as Carlos does. He's super professional. Just Reckless is kind of the same player. You know, I see Bjergsen, I see Reckless. If those guys were on one team, that would be super magic. You know, if they were on my team and we won, and LCS would ask us, so which player do you want to have in the interview? I'd say, guys, let's be honest, take both. They are perfect. You put them in front of the camera, and you know the way they talk, the way they present the brand, the team they play with, the way they explain the game. I think it's perfect. It's great. Not saying that my guys are not as good, but these guys are really, really good. Yeah. And I think they come very close to what Carlos did in the very beginning. They attract a lot of people. They want to get to know these guys. There's a lot of positive stuff around them. That's why they grow. And also, Carlos left the vacuum. This vacuum needed to be filled. Can Froggen take over? Can Crepo take over? Can Wicked take over? No, they can't. They are different characters. So I think that somebody like Bjergsen, who's that fresh, or somebody like Reckless, I'm actually quite sure that Reckless streaming numbers at some point, when he will focus on streaming, will go in the same direction. They will increase a lot. But that's part of, you know, being a superstar.
Question. I had you in mind when I thought of this question because I think you're one of the few people who could give me a real answer. I realize there's certain things business-wise that you can't say publicly, even for legal reasons, but you can tell me a rough way around to this topic. And so the topic is this infamous quote now, where Ocelot tells us all that he makes 600,000 euros a year, and then not only that, most of it comes from merchandising. Now, unless I'm just totally out of touch with the whole industry, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like I've thought behind the scenes, like what could he have made that much from, and then what would this be worth? And I can't possibly get the numbers even close. Like I don't even think I could get halfway there. Am I missing something completely here? How could you get to a number like that? Can you give me if not the direct answer, let's go by the scenic route, okay? What would you say?
So you're putting me on the hot spot. Nice.
You're the guy to ask.
Well, yeah. I think I am, because if you look at his shop and if you look at his merchandise, what we have is a scarf, a mouse pad, the keycaps, the shoes. Anything else?
I think that might be it. Maybe stickers or something? I don't know.
No, we didn't produce those.
Okay.
So those 4 products, we produced them for him, we set him up with those, and they all run still today on the SK Amazon shop.
Oh, okay.
So we know all the numbers. So these numbers don't add up to what he refers to, what he made out of, last year. The money from Riot, we all know that doesn't add up either. The money from SK, I have an imagination that it doesn't add up as well.
Okay.
I have a feeling for his streaming success. I don't see the money coming from that end. And then he had a couple of personal sponsorships, appearances, whatsoever, where I think he made some money, but then again, Digibet, I knew the deal back in the days. I don't see any of these other, sponsorships or appearances he had bringing 500,000 for one appearance to the table. So I have no clue. I can't tell you. It doesn't add up in my head as well. And I was responsible for a lot of what happened there, for a lot of these numbers. And I was just astonished as you were. I was trying to do the math, and it's not there. The money is not there. It's that simple.
Because even beyond the fact that you obviously were his boss before, there's the fact that I know a topic, as we've discussed in this interview, that you're always quite adamant about is like making sure the public perception of what things are worth is true. Because the problem is the public, if they only look at results and things like that, they're going to think, oh, spend as much as you can, invest everything in League of Legends now. And then if they see these numbers, this is why I wanted to bring it up, because I saw people have now started quoting that number. And then they'll use their own logic of like, well, if he makes that much, then Reginald must make this much, and then that means SK was making this. If we go down this route, then things can get really crazy if the original number isn't right. And so what I want to ask was this: is the general perception that far out from where things actually are? Because I know one big problem in the industry is people will always say if a Facebook page has too many likes, oh, they were all just bought. Like, it's like the idea that you can have an illusion of how big it is. How close is like what people really think, do you think, to like the hard numbers, do you think?
Well,
what's your sense of it,
Marketing-wise, you always try to put yourself in a better position. It's hard for you to, if you use Google Analytics, and if you send these stats to a sponsor, then they are very comparable with other websites. And there's no way you can really bullshit here. So that's very solid. In Facebook, I'm with you. I think there's a certain growth we have on Facebook likes that all esports teams have. And if one team outperforms the other teams, and if you look at the activity where it comes from, and all of a sudden you see the Philippines being responsible for that, for a brand that's based out of Europe, then at least it makes me think about it. At least I think, okay, but what's the value here? I think that you can have better Facebook statistics. And there's mechanisms that you can use to really narrow it down to. So if you have this and this amount of Facebook likes, but let's say 20% of your activity comes from a region that a sponsor doesn't want to advertise with, then he can take this away. It's very simple. He can do it on his own. He doesn't need me to explain it to him. We try to work with our sponsors and give them, okay, these are our numbers. Our biggest markets are Germany, Turkey, Northern America, Scandinavia, Poland, France, and so on. And we can give you the real numbers on Facebook. I would never give you my numbers for the Philippines or, let's say, even New Zealand. That doesn't make sense because none of my sponsors have an interest in the target group in New Zealand because it doesn't exist for them. There's no sponsorship coming from that area. So I think it's a give and get. There's a couple of bogus numbers and you need to make sure that you don't overextend here. And it's easy to buy 10,000 likes for 120 US. It's just like that. And they will also try to make them only come from the Northern American region. It's easy to cheat here. I think it's dangerous and you shouldn't do so. And then the interaction you have, just look at the likes you have on a post. Look at the comments you have on a post or anything you put out there. It needs to be in relation to the likes you have. And if that relation is totally off, then kind of your activity is off too, and you should only pay for the activity as a sponsor. That being said, going back to the initial argument you put on the table, I think it was the point in time when this interview was released and this number was on the table was around Worlds. And I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but it kind of stole the thunder of the guys that were competing for this most important trophy in esports right now, for the biggest cash prize in esports right now, and it stole their thunder a little bit. And that's dangerous, because that's trying to put marketing ahead of the real fact of the competition. Competition comes first. If you have an interview like that in the off season, when the World Championship is over, it's in the books, we can discuss about the point in time. But I think, especially this incident, was totally off. And then I also feel the numbers were off, and that gives me a very, I find it sad, to be honest, because the overall scenario, I mean, how unlucky can you be that you have this being published around Worlds? It's not good.
When I asked earlier in the interview, and I made the point that there's certain periods in time you identify with a specific game. So Counter-Strike's a great example. Then we have Quake with Rafa, Starcraft with MC, obviously. Some of these teams, like Counter-Strike, isn't really factoring as much now. Rafa, he can only get exposure when the tournaments are. There's only a couple a year. Yeah. Now MC has left, and there's no Starcraft at the moment. There's a void there. So League of Legends, like you said at the top of the interview, it's the main game. But right now, a factor of, like you were saying, you don't pay the highest salaries, and because of people leaving, you're in a rebuilding project. Okay, you're not going to have the best team immediately. People are going to wonder, how does SK see itself now amongst all the games? Like, does League of Legends, does that have to become the best team in Europe? Is that the route that it has to go on right now, just not knowing what's coming in the future? How do you see that aspect of SK?
No, we want stability. We want our players, we want to give them room to establish themselves. We want them to become a stable team in LCS, in Europe, to at some point go out there and say, yeah, we challenge Gambit, we challenge Fnatic, we want to be up there as well. But right now we're in the process of doing so. And the team was brought together beginning of January. Now we are like 6 weeks in, not even. And therefore I think we're doing good. We're doing okay. We're not stable enough, but the team has a lot of character. If you look at the games and how they played it and how they won certain games when they were with the backs against the wall, they pulled like very dominant games all of a sudden. And that started probably at DreamHack when we did this split push action against the team that's now Rocket and won DreamHack. But then also the character we showed at the promotion match. It was 2 matches basically. Yeah. It was an 0-2 where we played horrible. We were not even, I don't know what we did, but we didn't play League. And then we played the second set, 3-0, and this is how you play League at this level. And we now know that Super Hot Crew is a competitor. They are in the LCS, they belong there, and they bring very good results. So, what I expect from our team right now is to show this character more often, to stabilize, to get into the rhythm, and then let's play the summer split. Let's try and requalify for LCS for the summer split, and then let's see where we are then. But right now it's rebuilding.
So as my final question, I always like to go out with like a hypothetical type of answer, but to lighten the mood a little bit at the end. And so with your team, I thought a really good one was, some of the players in your team are known, some of them aren't so well known as people. Some of them aren't that outspoken, and the community is still getting to know them as people. So I know you're like a fan of rock music, so I want you to take the 5 players in this team and give me like an analogy, like who is this player like in terms of like a famous singer or a famous guitarist or something? Who would you pick for each member of the team, and give me a reason?
So Candy Panda can't be in rock music. No, sorry. No, he's an electronic guy. He would never be in rock music. That's tough. I would say N-rated is probably the Fly.
The Fly?
Yeah,
okay.
He does his job. He's very calm. He's always very chill. No, not U2.
Oh,
the bassist.
Oh, right, yeah.
I think he is just like him, super cool. Always very chilled, always extremely friendly, and has a deep knowledge of what he does. He does in music, he has in League of Legends. He was the easiest.
Oh, okay. Start easy.
Yeah, start easy. Freddy, I think Freddy is quite easy as well, because he's just freakishly constant. You know, if there's one thing we don't have to worry about, then it's top lane, because he does his job. He just goes out there, he does his job, and it's perfect. So he would be like not the lead guitar player, but the second guitar, the rhythm guitar. You know, let's say he's the kind of Izzy Stradlin. He's not outspoken. He's very, you know, behind the scene. But when he's out there, people don't know who Izzy Stradlin is, right?
I don't think so.
Okay, so he was the rhythm guitarist for Guns N' Roses.
Right, okay.
End of the 80s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So before all the changes there.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So that will be him. Sven Skeren. Yeah, he's got to be this crazy dude.
There must be a lot of them in rock music.
Phew. I could see him kind of on maybe, you know, Arctic Monkeys, something like that. He could come from this direction. Crazy. But when you look behind the curtain, very, you know, he knows exactly what he's doing.
All right.
But he's also kind of guy, he doesn't want to talk about this. So maybe he would be like the guys from Rage Against the Machine, except for the singer.
All right, everyone else said.
Everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, the guys that made it to Audioslave with Chris Cornell, and yeah, these guys. Super good, but you know, they don't have to show the world, but still crazy. Jesus, oh my God. How can he be a rock star? He's 17. Well, actually, that's very far off, and you got to really know him to understand it. But he would be a kind of Dave Grohl character, because he is absolutely funny. He always puts a joke in, but he kind of knows his stuff. And when things don't work out, like when he does mistakes, he's vocal about it. He's not the kind of guy who tries to hide behind those or anything. No, he just says it. Yeah, that was really shitty. There's no, you know, no, how you call it?
Beating around the bush.
Kind of that, yeah. Yeah, and Candy, he's not a rock musician at all.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have any final words, someone you want to thank or say hello to?
I think, you know, I'm not sure how this interview plays out at the end of the day, because we touched so many topics, and some of them will have a bigger emphasis than the others. At the end of the day, in esports, in all we do, long term is always the better choice. Like anything, like in interviews, what you contribute to esports for a long time is what really matters. I think what brands like Fnatic, Mouse Sports, EG right now, what they contribute is good, and it will lead to better things. Even if we discussed, you know, a couple of, yeah, that wasn't good, that wasn't good, that wasn't good, that's not the center of attention for us in esports right now. We try to focus on the good, on the positive, and if we see a negative, yeah, we might be vocal about it, yeah, and you might hear our voices about it, but we're not focused around it. So when the whole League of Legends thing happened last year for us, we tried to work with it as positive and as professional as even possible, to make the community understand that if we decide this player isn't good for us no more, then you should understand it as a community. It's not because we don't like the player or anything, it's because he's not a good fit for us. And if a player decides that he wants to leave the team, then the team isn't a good fit for him, in his opinion. And that's it. There is no hatred, there is no flame, no nothing. You might do mistake here, mistake there, yeah. But you know, these times when we all try to fight each other, like we did with Fnatic in the Counter-Strike days, I think they are over. And the community should try to accept that at some point. So that's my final words.
Okay. Danke.
Gern geschehen.